It's time for another part of the newbie guide, and in the last two parts we went over build crafting and weapon crafting. Now it's time to start getting into the nitty gritty and how you can fine tune your builds to do what you want them to do. Obviously it's dead easy just to go online and then pick out some random build that a YouTuber is posting, so if you want to do that, go for it. But if you want to make builds yourself, I would recommend doing it this way. The first thing you're going to want to do is pick a specific weapon that you want to make your build around. So the one I'm actually going to pick for the demonstration is going to be Trinity Ghoul, because Trinity Ghoul as a weapon is extremely lethal to red bars, and currently with the Guardian games out, it's actually really good to building up scores, so I need a good build to complement Trinity Ghoul anyway. So the first thing I'm going to look at is that it's an arc weapon type, so it would naturally make sense for me to go with an arc subclass, which is what I'm going to change this over to. Reading into Trinity Ghoul's traits is where I'm going to start with this as well, because I need to know what it actually does. So when you fire a Trinity Ghoul shot, the arrow actually splits out into multiple different arrows, but not only that, if you get a kill with it, you can actually charge your Trinity Ghoul shots as well. And when the charge shots hit, it actually sends out a burst of lightning into nearby enemies, which allows you to kill a lot of enemies really quickly. Naturally for Trinity Ghoul, I'm going to keep Gathering Storm on as a super because it's a ranged super. It just makes sense to have that alongside Trinity Ghoul. But before looking into my abilities and what grenades and dodges I'm going to use, I'm actually going to go over to the aspects and see what options I have. And flow state already looks promising because by defeating a jolted enemy, I actually become amplified, which is always a good thing for an art build. There is Tempest Strike, which is literally just a sliding uppercut, which can be good, but for the sake of Trinity Ghoul and being long range, it's not exactly going to do me any benefit, which is why I'm actually going to go with Lethal Current. And to be honest, the only reason I'm picking Lethal Current is because damaging any jolted target with a melee attack also blinds them, which the way I'm going to try and set this build up, I'm going to try and have it so any arc damage actually does jolt enemies. So ideally any enemy that I'm punching after I've hit them with an arrow which has jolted them, then I either want the punch to finish them off or blind them, which is going to be perfect for unstoppable champions as well. And a nice little bonus that's going to come out of this, if I actually jolt a overload champion, they will become stunned as well, so I'm taking care of two of the champions straight off the bat. I'm just going to quickly reset all the fragments so we can start over fresh, but I'm basically going to be looking for things that can amplify arc damage mostly, which is why I'm going to start with Spark of Ions, because defeating a jolt target actually creates an ionic trace, which Ionic Traces will give you ability energy, so it is just a win by using that. For the second fragment, I'm going to pick Spark of Amplitude, because when I'm amplified, I can create even more orbs of power alongside the siphons, which I'll add in later. I'm going to take Spark of Shock as well, because that means my arc grenades are going to jolt targets, which will be quite nice in the future. And just to make my grenades that a little bit better, I'm also going to use Spark of Magnitude, which will just increase the duration of Pulse Grenades, which is the ones I'm going to be using. So Pulse Grenade is already equipped, so I don't have to worry about that. For the melee attack, I'll actually keep it as Combination Blow, because I think Combination Blow is just better than Disorienting Blow in more or less every single regard, and just by having Lethal Current on at the same time, it pretty much becomes Disorienting Blow anyway. Jumps, I'll keep Triple Jump because Triple Jump is just good for me, but because this build isn't going to be focused on punching enemies, I'm actually going to use Marksman Dodge, because when it comes to the heavy later on, it'd be nice to have a very fast reload. So that is the subclass basically set up to complement Trinity Ghoul. Now it's time to focus on the other weapons and mods as well. As for the other two weapons I'm going to pick, I'm actually going to keep the Rufus's Fury and also a Retrofit Escapade as well, because they're actually quite a nice balance when it comes to dealing with just ads in general. Because when I'm not dealing with tons of red bars, Rufus is actually fairly good at dealing with mages, and on top of that, if I do actually end up fighting like a champion or something like that, I'll have the Retrofit Escapade to actually jump in with, and also that is going to deal a lot of damage to bosses as well. But generally when you're fine-tuning a build and you're thinking about weapons, you're basically going to want one weapon to deal with your red bars, another weapon that's going to deal with your mages, which are the orange bars, and then one for boss damage or champion damage if you want to call it that as well. And the exotic I've decided to go for is the Frosties, which is a bit weird for an arc build because mostly they're doing assassin scales. But the thing is, this is going to be a long range build anyway, so sprinting gives energy when you're doing it, and also dodging speeds up sprint. So there's a lot of benefits just to having this as an exotic, because it'll allow me to run away quickly when things start closing me down. And on top of that, whilst I am sprinting, it's going to recharge my abilities as well, which is going to make my grenades even better. Because like I said, with Trinity Ghoul being the focus of this build, it is going to be a long range build where I don't want to be in the middle of a firefight. Next up, we're going to respec the artifacts, because with a new build, we might as well do the artifacts. And I want Overload Bow, because it makes sense with me having Trinity Ghoul. Being able to actually stun Overload champions with the arrows instead of just trying to hope on a jolt, it is just a lot better to do it this way. Next time I'm going to pick Authorized Mods Grenades, because ideally that's going to be brilliant for my grenades mods in a minute. On the next row, the only one that's really going to affect my build is going to be Shatter Orb, so I'm going to take that. But apart from that, only really Prismatic Transfer applies, because if I'm actually popping my Arc Super and I've got a fire team with me, it might give them a weapon damage buff, provided they've got different types of subclasses. And if you're wondering why I did the artifact before the mods, it is because if you do the artifact before the mods, then you can get some mods at a discounted cost, which is going to massively change how you plan your build. So on the helmet, I'm just going to literally have a discipline build so I can get my discipline up a little bit, because a lot of it was costed. Harmonic Siphon, because generally whatever subclass you're running alongside the weapon you're using is going to be the same type, so this is why that's there. It's just a very cheap siphon. However, I will change hands on into ashes to assets, because that means grenade kills are going to be what gets me super energy, which is what I'm going to be doing mostly. Heavy ammo finder, because it's always nice to get extra heavy ammo. As for this mod, I'm actually going to change it into a resilience mod, because if you see on the right corner, my resilience is very close and it's got a +3. That's because I got an artifice cloak that's giving me a +3, so I'm going to remove that in order to get the +5. And when that happens, I will pretty much be on a very even 80. As for the melee kickstarts, I'm actually going to sub one out for a grenade kickstart, and then the second one, I'm actually going to go for Font of Focus, because now when I have an armor charge, it's actually going to give me a bonus to my discipline, which is going to be really handy for getting my grenade back even quicker. And because I'm getting final blows with said grenades, I might as well just have firepower as well for the extra orbs of power that will drop. And it turns out this mobility mod is just giving me 5 extra mobility for no reason, so I'm going to swap that to a discipline mod, and that will put me over the threshold for a tier 6, which is very good for grenade cooldown. Now we move on to the Frosties, which does not have any mods in because I've not used it really at all this season, and it's not masterworked, so if it's masterworked it would be even better. But I'm going to start off with the mods rather than the stats, because it's going to be a lot easier to manage that way, and one of them I have to have is Art Weapon Surge. It will make Trinity Ghoul do even more damage. The same kind of justification, I'm using a Void Weapon as my heavy, so if I have a Void Weapon Surge, Retrofit Escapade is going to be even stronger as well. And then there's something that I do as just a pet peeve. I need to have recuperation, because every time I pick up an orb of power, I'll get some health back. And I'm going to try and create loads of orbs with this build, so it's going to be nice if I've got loads of healing options around me. Which leaves me 2 stat points left. Obviously, I'd have 3, but I don't think 3 is going to make a massive difference to this build. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the 2 into Intellect, which will put me over to tier 6, which is fair enough for me. Finally, the Cloak, which I'm actually going to keep largely the same. Apart from Outreach, I will swap that for Bomber, because if I use my class ability, it reduces grenade cooldown, which is always nice. Proximity Ward I'll have as a rule of thumb, because it'll just give me an overshield when I'm doing my finisher, which is nice. Time Dilation will basically just increase the armor charge time, so this is going to be really nice for when I get my weapon surges up, so Trinity Ghoul will keep doing a lot of damage to that. Or Retrofit Escapade will be able to deal longer damage as well if I'm using that. And with the way I've built up this build, it actually means that this +3 stat is completely pointless. It doesn't matter what I put into, because there is nothing that is going to be increased by it, so I'm just going to chuck into Recovery, because it's the lowest one, and if I want to get some recovery later on, I just need a minor mod and it'll be fine. But the +10 discipline, I'm happy with keeping, because I want a high discipline anyway, so very nice stats overall. 80 resilience is fairly good to have, 50 mobility, 60 discipline for the grenade, 61 intellect for a decent recharge super, not amazing though. But as a rule of thumb, what I've essentially just made is a build that tends to run away very quickly, but it does have options in order to keep itself safe. But it's designed to be a mid to long range fighter, which is exactly what I'm going to be using it for. But the reason I showed you how to make a build this way is because if you want to use a specific weapon and you want to make a build around it, this is probably the ideal way to go about it. But it has to be said as well, this is all trial and error, so if you feel like something is not working in your build, you can always fine tune it. So let's say hypothetically my Frosties aren't working, or the ability regen isn't kind of working out for me. There is absolutely nothing stopping me from swapping into another armor piece like this, and pretty much just putting back on Assassin's Cowl, or maybe even a Wormhusk Crown. Just give me a bit of extra utility with my dodgers or punches. But when you're happy with your build, do your drip, because this is probably like the most satisfying thing that you can do with it. Obviously, this is not the same build, it is just the transmog I wanted to show off because it's very cool drip. But that's pretty much it for this video. The goal of it was literally just to show you how you can fine tune a build to a specific weapon, or if you wanted to go to a specific armor piece, you can do that as well. But remember to leave a like and a comment down below telling me if this is helpful, or if there's any questions you have on build crafting, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of Guardian games.